Violence against women and girls is factually on the rise.
I would feel like weird vibes in public.
Young men are not being exposed to female role models.
The innocence of childhood is robbed from people.
I feel unsafe to call it out because what if they attack me?
We live in a system that does not fundamentally value women.
Hi, welcome to Roundtable. I'm Millie, and I'm here with a fantastic panel to talk about violence against women and girls, which has been declared a national emergency. It's quite a heavy subject, but this is a safe space where we can all listen to each other and reflect on our personal experiences. So this first question's for the women here. When was the first time that you were made to feel uncomfortable or unsafe purely because you are a woman?
I think during secondary school, when I was 13 or something, wearing school clothes, creepy men coming up to me and just trying to talk to me, and I was so young and I just felt unsafe at that time.
I don't know if it's the first time, but it's definitely one of the most vivid. In my house, we are quite comfortable with each other, so being scantily clad isn't really an issue. So I was wearing shorts and a little bra, and my uncle had come over. I didn't think much of it. I was just in the living room watching TV, and he came in and he got really, really upset with me. And he was like, "Why do you look like that while I'm here?" And it was the first time I realized that actually I can be causing a problem for someone by just existing and being a woman.
I agree. I think it started young, just being in school and attraction from boys my age, but also I would feel weird vibes in public with older men.
I think mine's quite similar to yours. In high school, and just wearing our uniform and getting comments from teachers saying that my skirt was too short, even though it was the right length. It was just because they could see my leg. And instantly it was a distraction for the boys, but I didn't understand why, because that's just my uniform.
Yeah.
I think from a male's perspective, growing up, I've been fortunate to live in two countries. I lived in Australia, now I live here. And it's amazing that even though the countries are halfway around the world from each other, misogyny is still the same. There is still the same behaviour, still the same perceptions amongst women. And I think that growing up, because I'm an athlete, I've competed and trained with a lot of female athletes. I've seen the world of sports and how, men dominant, they feel like they can abuse that power against women, especially female athletes. And I try to always do my best to try and call it out, because I want someone who's training next to me and competing next to me to feel as safe as I do. Because I'm also a person with a disability, so I can relate to that sense. So I might not be a woman in that sense, but having a disability, I understand the frailties of that thought that people think they're higher than you. And I always try to do my best to call it out, as an ally and as a friend as well, I hope.
Rhammel, I actually wanted to ask you, do you have an early memory of witnessing an experience like this?
Repeatedly, and I think it's sad to think how normalised it was. In my gut, I always found those things uncomfortable, but it was very normalised for boys in schools and sometimes teachers as well to treat women and young girls appallingly. And for me, what's quite sad about that is just the innocence of childhood is robbed from people through experiences like that. But I'm quite glad you brought up disabilities, because I think quite often when this conversation's had, we don't reflect on how all liberation is connected and how actually the way in which we view women is quite oppressive to a lot of different people. And all of it comes down to having a very specific perspective of how the world should work. And for me, that's what's quite infuriating. But when we reflect on mental health, and if you have the privilege of, having the opportunity to speak to a therapist, etc., one of the things that becomes very clear from most people who experience therapy is how much of our trauma is rooted in childhood, and how much of the way that we behave and the way that we reflect on things comes from there. And how sad is it that young girls can't just turn up to school and do what they're supposed to be doing, which is learning.
That's what I never understood. I'm at school to learn. Why is my appearance or how I'm dressed being picked apart when there's actually nothing wrong with it? And majority of the time, it wasn't the men around me or the boys around me growing up. It was teachers, and they massively set the tone for how the boys then treat us when we got a little bit older in school, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it was almost an open secret as well to me. We would speak about it amongst students sometimes. It would come up. Obviously, we wouldn't talk about violence against women, or it wouldn't be framed in this very specific way, but we still spoke about like inappropriate behaviour or comments from teachers, and we understood that it felt uncomfortable, but no one weirdly saw it as a red line, even though it absolutely should have been.
It's actually funny you say that, because I don't remember there being any like real conversation or curriculum about safety for girls and women. Like, and it was happening everywhere. Like, it was normal to have been assaulted or inappropriately touched in school. And like you said, no one spoke about it. And if we did speak about it, it was amongst ourselves, and it was normal. So we never spoke about it like a problem. It would just be laughing and joking about it. And you look back and you're like, actually, like that happened a lot and that was wrong.
Yeah.
So I think there should be way more light shed on it, and it should be spoken about. It shouldn't be kept hush, because that's what allows it to continue as well.
So we've reflected a lot on like our experiences of school and growing up, but I guess it doesn't stop there, right?
I mean, I guess it just starts there, and then it goes out into the world, whether you're going to just the shops and running errands, or you're going to parties and stuff. Parties more so, because that's a very like rampant environment where it's dark, people are under the influence. And I can say myself, luckily, I've not had any like terrible experiences, but I've had friends who experience like being spiked and whatnot. And it's like now all of our like desires of wanting to go out and enjoy ourselves and do things are like controlled by the fact that we also need to like be careful. So some nights I like want to be like, oh, let's go out, but it's like, oh, but there's going to be these guys there and that's going to happen. And so it almost like puts a cloud over your life of like, you can do what you want to do, but just know that you're never going to be safe doing it. And so you kind of walk around with your eyes over your shoulder all the time. And you learn to live that way.
I don't know about you guys, but anytime I stay out late, I always think about how am I going to get home, and should I take an Uber, and you know the expenses that comes with that, and just feeling unsafe, like traveling like home at night, and you know not wearing what I want to wear. If I want to wear like a dress or like a mini dress, I have to like wear a coat over it, so like I don't have creepy looks with me. I feel like more so like when I was younger, I felt like really, really unsafe. Every day I would go out and just, you know, creepy men will come up to me and be like, hey, you know, and I just felt really unsafe.
I love going on runs. And sometimes I'll talk to my guy friends. They're like, yeah, we love like running at night, like when it's dark, because, you know, I like to run when it's, you know, a little bit cooler. It's not, you know, the sun's out, but not too much. And I'm like, wow, I don't really have that luxury, you know, to run at night. Maybe if I had a dog, but even then, it's just like we don't have certain luxuries as men do. And it's sad because why should we be uncomfortable in these situations? For me, I just want to run. I'm like, I would never even think or consider running at night.
Yeah, I mean, you speaking about spiking, I got spiked on my first night at university, and I didn't have any idea that that would even be a thing then. Like being new to going out and spending time outside of my hometown as well, I didn't know that that would ever be a situation. And I was knocked out for like 24 hours, like in hospital. And it's just, after that, then you're like, okay, I'm really not safe in these places. And it sticks with you. And I know you say like it gets maybe a little bit easier, but I think we just learn to live with it.
Yeah.
Like this weekend, I was out with my boyfriend and he went to the toilet and I was stood by myself and men were coming up to me. I was able to say to the men, like, my boyfriend's at the bar, like, he'll be back in a second. And they just backed off. But I know if I said my friend's with me, they just stick around.
I mean, that's what gets me quite angry about the framing that quite often comes up when we talk about this conversation, where women are expected to be this perfect model of like what it would be to protect themselves. So they wear certain things, they act in a certain way, they're not too loud, they don't draw attention to themselves. Okay, so just existing then. Like, why should we expect women to be framed in this very specific way? But actually, even when women do those things, so when they dress conservative, when they're quiet, when they do all the things that they're supposed to do to keep themselves safe, actually we have incidences like Sarah Everard, or women who still manage to get themselves attacked just for existing in a space. And actually, clubs are the one space that frustrate me most, because I remember even when I first started going out clubbing, particularly with my girls specifically, with the boys it's slightly different, but certainly with the girls, the amount of times I would have to almost pretend to be multiple women's boyfriends that night just to get other guys to move away, so I didn't even have to have the conversation with them. And that's crazy to me, that that's just the expected behavior in a club, is that you have to kind of pretend that you're with somebody, or say my boyfriend's at the bar, or you have to start making up all these different falsehoods just so you can enjoy a drink and dance and do what you're there to be doing.
I think that comes back to, we spoke earlier before about childhood and how all this education comes from childhood. The power dynamics are set from childhood. And I think many of you spoke about school and your first experiences in school. Well, I never went to school. Well, very early on I did, but I was homeschooled, and I was homeschooled by my mother. I think that because having her as my teacher, she showed me the role of what a woman should be in my life, and that she exposed me to female role models that I look to and go, oh my God, they're amazing. I think that growing up, young boys and young men are not being exposed to female role models and being exposed to, this is what I need to respect, this is how amazing they have done and what the achievements have done. And that goes across anyone in any marginalized community as well. I think that in school, there's not been that example set that everyone is equal. The education system has been set up to show that men are powerful and women are not. That's why when you speak about at the bar, when the man comes up, everyone backs off, because they're like, that's the power dynamic. Why is it not when a woman's coming up, they say, oh, I'm gonna back off too? Because they have never been taught to respect a woman like that, and they've never been exposed to women role models like that. So to the girls, I just wanted to ask a general question that I'm very curious about. What were the kind of conversation that you've had with, you know, mentors or teachers or parents or that special person that you consider those boundaries and respect?
I can't remember any conversations around consent, respect, or boundaries. I can't think of anything. The only thing that was spoken about was just sex education, which is just how to make a baby. It's not really about anything else, and at least mine wasn't. Even at home, there wasn't really any conversations around consent. It was more like boundaries for how men wanted us to be. Like, that's the only conversation I really remember having, like, you know, don't be too hormonal, or don't show that you're emotional, or don't be too aggressive or bossy.
Would you say that you were never taught your own agency? You were always restricted back with your own agency, like you say, to fit men, as opposed to being yourself?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. It was, this is the mold that you should try and fit into, so try your best and see how you get along with it. And it's just such the wrong way to go about it, because people want to be themselves. Do you know what I mean? Everyone wants to be able to be themselves regardless of gender, race, sexuality. And you are just kind of told, this is your mold and try your best to fit into it. And if you don't fit into it, things might not go the way you want it to.
I completely agree with you. Like, I wasn't, you know, there was no lessons in school about consent, or no one taught it to us. I think it's the media, and, like, you know, with the whole Me Too movement, I think that's where everyone kind of realized, okay, you know, consent needs to happen in order to, you know, have sex or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember there being a conversation, actually, whether it be teachers or anybody I looked up to, or yeah, no one said anything. It was like a learn as you go kind of thing. And then, as Millie said, you were learning how to shrink yourself and learning how to stop others from hurting you when they were the ones using their own intention and their will to do things to you. So somehow it always managed to be our fault. So yeah, I only ever remember being, like, blamed or told that, you know, well, you could have done this and you could have done that. But yeah, and I remember actually saying to, like, my mum once, why don't you, like, speak to, like, boys about these things? And she was like, well, you know, they're boys. And that was it. So I think being a woman, I've kind of understood that now feels like I always have to control my own free will in order to stop these things being done to me, as opposed to, like, yeah, the people who are causing the issues, the men who are doing this to us, being the ones to have the conversations being had with them.
I didn't really have any experiences with violence until I got older, but when I was younger, I had a friend that was pretty close to me that was in a relationship, and she was raped, but she was with the guy, so it was very hard for her to even distinguish what had happened. And so when she told me, I was obviously upset because it was somebody that was really close to me. And I was like, if you didn't consent to that, then that wasn't, that was rape. And I grew up in a 2-parent household, so I was fortunate enough to have a lot of support, and I did get those conversations. My mom was very blatant with me about the world that we live in, but that situation with my friend, I took it to my parents, and they were able to help her get support. It was hard for her to open up to her mom and just people at the school, but she thought of protecting him, so it's just and we were young, but it's still not okay. Mm-hmm. And there was no consequences, no actions that were taken towards that matter for the guy. So just a very unfortunate situation.
I just thought it was interesting how, your friend had been in that situation and still she was thinking of almost protecting the person that's hurt her. And I feel that's a lot of what we experience, how even though we are victims, we're always thought to think of other people first, aside from ourselves. I guess it just doesn't help in, these situations where we do have to advocate for ourselves because no one else is doing it. Just learning to be on your own side as well.
I do think it's interesting how the pattern here is that we've kind of just been shaped by our experiences and what we've seen. And I have very early childhood memories of the way that my mum would respond to the way that things would happen in the world, whether that would be the experiences she'd have of the way that men would treat her in the street. And I remember that really vividly. I also feel like sometimes it can be really easy to talk about this as individual issues and this is just a broken system when actually things are working exactly as people want them to. And I think sometimes it's reductive to just focus on the incidents because this is actually a part of a whole system of things that are happening around us. And the world's evolving to that. Social media is a good example of that, where actually for me, quite often we end up focusing on very specific things that come up on social media when actually there are companies that orchestrate that allow that system of things to happen. And for me, it's more powerful to reflect on that. But I don't know what other people's views are on social media. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I get frustrated because it's not just individual behaviors, it's how society is coming around to kind of look at and view these issues as well.
On that point around social media and society, I thought a really stunning example, in a bad way, not in a good way, that society showed itself is when the Lionesses won the Euro 2020. For many, many years, the country was saying when was England going to win, and it happened to be the women's team that won before the men's, which was really great. But then you see on social media, all these trolls saying, oh, that's nice, or try to be patronising, or yeah, but it doesn't count, or women's football is this. And I thought, you're just not getting the point, are you? England is not just the England's men's team, it's everything that encompasses England, which is the women's team, the disability team, etc. and so forth. And it doesn't help that social media giants and big social media billionaires as well that are really fueling that hate instead of saying, no, social media was a place for good, because that's what social media was sold on. It was sold on a platform that this is how we connect more people together, how people can share their experience more together. Instead, what it's turned is this spiraling out of control of misogyny, racism, homophobia, engine that is just causing such discontent in society because they feel like when you put something out there, 8 billion people in the world knows about it. And I think that's where people feel they're wrestling with their privacy and their agency around social media.
Yeah, I think on social media, it's such a really tough one because there's so much good that's on it. There's so much education, but I think we're seeing now what is coming out of all the bad stuff that has been on social media, stuff with Andrew Tate, everything around that. I think it fuels what may already be in a man, possibly. I work on social media. I'm a content creator for women's safety. And I just see it so much, even on my videos, I'll film something about safety or my experience or how women can keep themselves safe and things that men could be doing possibly to change it for us. And instantly I'll get a comment something like, oh, why are we speaking about this? Are you still going on about this? It's not a problem. It's just wild that there's so many examples, but it's still not getting to some people. That's what I don't understand.
I would say I think misogyny has definitely become far more visible online. And I think, like you said, the internet can be a tool for great good or complete bad, like chaos. You know, we're all in control of how we use it, but we're all using it as individuals. So you start to see just how misogyny that you see in real life that might not be so like overt, you see it online and this you see like, oh, this is actually what they're thinking. That's the mentality that fueled that behavior. So yeah, I think what's happening online is just, you've just had like kerosene thrown on this fire, and all of the behavior that we experience in real life, we see the manifestation of like those groups online, like you said, the Andrew Tates and whatnot. A lot of those men are dealing with things emotionally probably and having had bad experiences, but instead of maybe taking the time to examine, you know, their own behavior or the situation that they were in, they just find a very simple, low-level rhetoric by someone who really doesn't care about you. You know, they just want your clicks, they want your likes. It's profit over people now. So they listen to that and they feel empowered and validated by it and they just run with it. You know, and then before you know it, you've got these massive red pill spaces, you've got the manosphere and all kinds of places. Like my little cousin was playing Roblox the other day and they were talking about Andrew Tate and I was like, you're 7 years old. How did this get here? You know? And it spreads and it's not just, you know, adults anymore, it's kids.
I think back on the topic of like protecting men, you know, with this whole Diddy scandal going out, the comments are very telling. Like, oh, he makes good music. I'm sorry, like some of the comments should go out the window because people are defending the behavior. Even like a few years ago with Quavo and Saweetie, with the elevator thing, just like defending behavior again and again on social media. For me, that's very telling, like seeing the comments is very sad, you know, to see as a woman.
I think the headline though, from what you just said, is profit over people.
Yeah.
And for me, that goes back to the system. Like, the way in which misogyny operates, the way in which the patriarchy operates is all part of a system of oppression from my perspective. And when we view it in that way, that's when we can really wake up to what's happening. Because even when we see people standing by, quite often, you know, people who have done terrible things, often because it's profitable ultimately, and it profits to hate. And that's the sad kind of underlying factor in all of this, is that all of these things are because ultimately the world works in this way because it makes some people money and it's not very profitable for it to change. That's the sad truth of it. And it just angers me that we can't make progress because that's the way that the system is. We sit in a capitalist society, and as long as someone's able to profit, shrug shoulders.
You just said about like Quavo and things like that. I've seen so many videos of people defending Chris Brown. Obviously, he's gone on his tour and so many people are supporting him. And the BBC did a video of interviewing people who were queuing up for it. And a lot of the women were saying like, oh, it was ages ago. Are we still going on about that? And I couldn't believe it. And I think I see this a lot on social media as well, like the internalized misogyny that women don't even realize that is instilled in them. You know, I notice it in myself sometimes. I notice it in my mum, my sister, but I think it's just about awareness as well. Like it's still education for us. We've been taught our whole lives that we have to fit into a mold, and we still have to unlearn that. And I think that's okay, but as long as you're aware of it. And it's really sad to see that some people don't want to be a part of that, or they're just not aware and they're not educated by it. Violence against women and girls is factually on the rise. It is declared a national emergency now. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel unsafe. Like, what Henry was talking about earlier about football. I don't watch football, but when like England lost or something, that's when domestic violence against women went skyrocketed. And I don't know why.
Men feel like they have to express their anger and they feel they have to, you know, dominate their behaviour over something that they perceive weaker, and in their mind, women is weaker. I'm a trustee for white women, and that looking at educating male violence against women and girls. So being a role model for men and saying this type of behaviour can't stand up, so they can talk to their male friends and say this kind of behaviour doesn't work. I've heard from many women it's one of the most worst experiences to attend a male football game because of how many men are there. And I've seen it myself, all the whistling, all the chasing up, and I think it's just some of the most vile behaviour. And when I volunteered for the Women's World Cup back in Australia, the atmosphere was very much more family friendly because it was predominantly women that were going, and it was just black and white contrast on behaviours, and you can really see that the problem is in those big male society codes. And I think that's why, you know, especially amongst men, we should be talking to our male friends and saying, when you see this, it's not funny. It's really you think it might be banter, which is another thing, especially amongst young men. It's it's just banter, don't be silly. But it cultivates and it builds up over time to become your perception. And that's when you start to normalise it. That's when you start turning a blind eye to it. And you don't realise the effect that it has on the women around you.
I think violence against women and girls being declared a national emergency, it's not surprising. I'm not shocked by it, but I think it's just gone too far. It makes me feel completely exhausted because even things that have happened to me and experiences that I've shared, I've still got men in my life that think sexist jokes are okay or the objectification of women is funny. And I'm like, you've seen what things have done to me, like those experiences have done to me, and it's still not enough for you to change. So I just feel exhausted. And as well, I kind of feel a responsibility to teach the men in my life about that. Even my dad, like he's in his 60s and I still have to say like, Dad, you can't say that. Or it makes me feel a certain way when you say that. And it's frustrating that it's just never enough.
This is why, for me, it comes back to like societal values and systems again, because part of the reason we're in this place is because we haven't paid enough attention to the way that women have spoken about their experiences over and over and over again. We've denied women's experiences, and we don't have a system that actually is built to respond to that. So if we want to reflect on the criminal justice system and the number of women who do put themselves through reporting the issues that they experience, and the response to that is, it doesn't go very far. You know, people get away with far too much. We now have a government that's kind of decided to look at hate crimes more broadly and make misogyny an aggravated offence. And I just think, how is it that we've only just come to have that conversation now? But even so, okay, we're going to make it an aggravated offence, but is that going to change the wider system when ultimately, time and time again, women are failed by the criminal justice system and people just get away with it?
I think to sit here and rely on the system would be a waste of time, honestly, because the systems have been around for forever and they've been the same. And as much as there are movements and organisations that are doing work to change and progress is being made, we do have to come back to looking at ourselves and each other on an individual basis. We live in a system that does not fundamentally value women unless we are, you know, working for something, or unless we are attractive or we have something to give or expend of ourselves. The way I feel about the violence happening right now, very exhausting, very, very scary. But I do kind of feel a personal responsibility, like you said, to try and like make a change. And I don't want, if men are listening to this, them to feel like the weight is all on them. You have a community around you of your fellow men that you can speak to. And it's difficult, do you know what I mean? It's hard, especially when you are part of the problem. It can be easy to just turn a blind eye or just feel like, you know, well, it's not my problem, or it wasn't me, why are you speaking to me about it?
I do think, though, that men have a role in just unlearning this kind of defense thing where like, oh, it's not me, so therefore, and it's like, well, actually, no, but we all participate in the system. We all play a role in it. And so there are things I've had to unlearn. There are things I have to reflect on. There are moments where I think, oh, I should have said more. Right? And sometimes it's not necessarily that you're always perpetuating something. It might even be that you were a bystander in a moment when you shouldn't have. Like when people talk about men, I don't feel personally offended by that, because for me, I know that these things are perpetuated by men. And so it's better for me to just listen in that moment and try and understand than it is to just suddenly be like, well, it isn't me. Well, okay, it might not be you in this moment, but at some point in life, you've never been, like, this thing is on a scale that means there's no way you haven't participated in some way, whether it's to perpetuate, bystand, whatever it is, you've been part of this, and just take the moment to, like, acknowledge that.
You were speaking about the justice system and how corrupt things are. And I don't know if you girls have ever had any experiences with the justice system, but my experience is I didn't particularly want to go and report something because I haven't heard anything positive coming of that, and it just put me off completely. I did end up going to report, and it's ongoing, and it's years and years and years for it to process, and you're constantly kind of brought back, and it's all dragged back up, and it's awful the way the system is around it, and you don't get much support. And even in an interview that I had, I got asked, like, how did he know that you didn't want to do it? And I was just so shocked that an actual policeman had asked me that. And I think daily, I wish I'd never even reported it, but for the sake of change, I'm glad that I did. And I think the change that can be made is so much higher up, and this is probably part of the reason it feels so exhausting. But I think we are seeing it, whether it's a little bit too late, I don't know, but we are seeing things like the strangulation law that's just come in and the banning of the porn that shows that, I think is positive. But I'm just wary now of whether it is kind of too little too late.
We need to build that coalition. I think there's so much great work that's going out there, but it's in isolating circumstances, whether the government's doing it by itself, whether community organisations are doing it by themselves, or charities are doing it by themselves. I think that if you look on the other side, more extreme parties, more notably like someone like Reform, they take misogyny as an excuse for their agenda. They will try and link, like, the Southport riots were linked to misogyny, but then they took it into immigration. Then it spiraled protests across the country. I think that we need to have our own counter argument, and we're all coming together saying, the role of women and the role of young women and girls in our society is very, very important. And how you do that is, talking to each other, which we've done many, many times, but really actioning it, because the government has put a commitment to their manifesto to halve domestic violence against women and girls. So they're holding themselves accountable for it.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about the far right and the way it's operating in the UK is that they're very good at, like, the point will be here, and they're very good at creating a distraction so everyone looks over here, and it's really frustrating, and I think we have to become wise to it and do everything we can to not feed it. When I reflect on this issue and I think about how this has affected me, I think about the times when I felt paralyzed to respond to violence that I've seen, and where I felt crippled by, like, what can I do in this moment? And then there's been other times where I felt more empowered and then become a victim myself. And that angers me too. It's really difficult to know when to stand up, when to also think about your own safety. I can even think of one specific example where I was kind of agonizing over this man who was just shouting at this woman. I had my headphones in, so I couldn't really work out what was going on. And I was kind of agonizing over responding, because I was thinking, we live in a society where if I intervene, is anyone else here going to support me or this woman right now? Eventually I did. And for intervening, I was given homophobic abuse and, threatened with violence. And I think to myself, who knows where that person is in society now, but he's obviously lived in a society where no one's really challenged him. He didn't even think twice about the fact that he was in public. To him, that didn't matter.
I don't think I've had any instances where I've been a bystander of, like, someone like being harassed, like a woman being harassed. But I feel like if I were to, I would feel unsafe to, like, call it out, because what if they attack me? And I don't want to put myself in that situation, but then I don't want to be part of the problem,
I have definitely stepped up before, and I think it was just like a reaction instantly. I didn't really think about it, didn't really have a thought process, but I saw someone put something in a drink that he'd got for a girl. And when he turned around, I just slapped the drink out of his hand and it just fell on the floor. And then instantly he got aggressive. But
Did anyone step in for you though? I suspect there was probably other people. Did anyone step in when he got aggressive or?
No one stepped in initially, but then I think people saw what was going on and security had to come over. And instantly they just started questioning me. And I was so confused, and I was like, you can check the cameras. I'll stand here while you check the cameras. I know what I saw. Like, I'm not gonna try and gaslight myself, because as women, we do that so much and be like, did I really see that? Or did that really happen? Because we get questioned so much in society, but inevitably they did watch it, they saw it, and they kicked him out. But yeah, you're right, I've never thought about it like that. No one actually stepped in for me in that moment.
It's interesting that you mentioned security, because so often security are actually part of a problem, because ultimately their primary responsibility isn't really the safety of the people in that club or bar. It's actually to just protect the organization. Because there's been times when, as you say, you report things and they're challenging you. I had a friend spiked, and I was trying to say she's been spiked. There's just no way. Like, we'd had maybe a couple of drinks on the way there, but nowhere near enough for her to be on the floor. We've only just arrived. How's that possible? And they wouldn't even entertain it.
One of the situations that I've been in that was like pretty scary, nothing happened, but I was dating a guy very briefly for a couple of weeks. We went on a date and we went back to his place. I had no intentions of sleeping with him or anything. We were just watching a movie. But again, like, when I told the story to some people afterwards, they're like, you should have never been in that situation. And, I'll move differently next time. But what situation was I even walking into? Like, we were watching a movie. But again, like, as women, we have to be careful because you don't know. But the guy basically, he just started getting aggressive, touchy. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm here for. We had a conversation. And I remember him telling me, like, I could have you right now. And I'm a woman of God, so I was just in my head, like, praying, like, Lord, please get me out of this situation. And we're just looking at each other. It was very intense. And I was like, no, I need to go home. I'm not doing this. He's very big. And I remember he's like, okay. He ended up driving me home. And I think the Holy Spirit intervened in that moment. But at the same time, I was just like, I've been talking to this guy for a while. I've known of him for a while as well. So it was just a very scary situation. I've been in a lot of situations that could have gone left. But I know a lot of people that were victims, and it just saddens me that there's so much like defending behavior, especially when you know somebody. Like I was mentioning with the celebrities, it's like we know them, we feel a personal attachment, but people still need to be held accountable, because if we can't hold them accountable, and you're helping them as well, because somebody's gonna hold them accountable eventually, whatever that may look like.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that guy kind of instantly turned to aggression. And I think this is something I really want to get across to men, is that they have been conditioned through society to, if they feel anything that feels vulnerable, like if they feel rejected or if they feel that someone has overlooked them, their instant thing is to reject the vulnerability and turn it into dominance and aggression and control. Whereas women were taught to go into that vulnerability, really, and that's like a power that we have, is to be vulnerable. And I don't think men realize that the patriarchy does affect them in that way, because it's how they've been conditioned societally. And even maybe agreeing with that, maybe it feels vulnerable for men, but I think that's something that I really kind of try and get across in my own work and my own content, that inevitably it does affect them, which then affects us. So if we all join together, that's the best chance we have of kind of stopping it the way we can.
Yeah. So just on the quick point about being a bystander, my role in it, and because I'm always by myself, and I'm in a small town in Loughborough, it's not like I have a lot of people around me, and I have to think about my own safety. I'm always thinking in that kind of invisible, active bystander, because like you mentioned before, especially amongst guys, if you're in a group of guys and you try and stand up to them, a lot of guys wrestle with, is it worth losing my mates over this? That's why my role has always been an invisible bystander, being aware of seeing things that they can't see, that they might not be seeing, and I'm checking it for them. I think that's the role that, being deaf as well, I'm very observant in that aspect. And I've taken that as a way to look after everyone else that surrounds me, and I do that heavy thinking myself just to make it a bit more comfortable for me leaving that situation, but also for that person who might not even be aware that they might be potentially threatened to be safe. And that's my kind of role in society, and it makes me want to open it up to all of you. Do you think change is coming? Do you think change is happening now?
I think change is happening. Unfortunately, because violence is rising, I think we're changing a lot in the wrong direction. And I think it is because a lot of the rise of the spaces that we have on social media. But just because things are getting a bit worse doesn't mean I don't have hope. I think I do have hope, because as much as there are places that are getting worse, there are places that are getting a lot better. You know, you've got the rise of a lot of self-help content, which, you know, you could go into that all day, but a lot of that content is, even if it's just giving people an introductory to their own behaviour. I feel like a lot of it is an emotional issue for men and a mentality issue, first and foremost, because when it comes to the violence, I wouldn't think that anybody is seeing that and thinking that that's okay, but to them it is, because they feel justified. As much as they're not, they feel justified. They feel like that's all right. So I feel like with content like that and having people, you know, take a look at themselves and, you know, examine their behaviour, I think we're hopefully going to get to a place where there is more accountability with each other, and also being able to speak out and be honest with themselves about whether it be things they've witnessed or they've done, or experiences that they've had, being objective about it as well. Because I have seen more so now in my own personal life, like guys that I know say things and do things that I'm like, oh, like I wouldn't expect that from you, you know, like, and it's sad that, you know, as a woman, you kind of expect the misogyny to come, you expect them to say or do, you know, something that isn't respectful. But whenever they do exhibit behaviours, I try to like inquire and encourage. And it's sad because sometimes it is so simple, but I feel like every little does help.
I agree. I think I have a cautious hope, is what I would say. Like mainly because the world around us is not going in the direction that we need it to for all the things that you've mentioned. But the reason I have a cautious hope is because so many of the things that we need to do to succeed for women and for society are not brand new ideas. So even intersectionality, for example, as a concept, most people in the UK probably only learned about it in maybe 2018, 2019, it started to be popularized. But actually that model for thinking is something that's existed for decades. And, you know, Kimberly Crenshaw's work and how that operates in this is quite important. But that just hasn't just started. These are things that people have been talking about for liberation for a very long time. And so for me, when I know that actually the route to liberation isn't something that we just dreamt up. We haven't just come up with these ideas now. These are things that people have been speaking about for a long time. I know we do have the capacity for getting somewhere different, but it does require complete rewiring of the system.
I think I'm the same as you. Like, I'm hopeful, but with a lot of caution. Because like you said, the world is just crazy at the minute. And I just think you have to have hope. Like, I'm not working in this area and I'm not talking about these things for no reason. I always think about like my future daughter and what, like the world I want her to grow up in and what I can do to kind of prevent that for her. I think that you're seeing a lot of like activism for minorities now. And I love to see that, like for different races, for the LGBTQ. And that makes me feel hopeful because as women, like we need the same sort of activism and we do get that.
I'm very hopeful. The world is getting, you know, darker and darker by the day, but this is not the world that God intended. And we are the hope. You know, even, you know, I've been in a situation to where I was a victim. I can't carry myself as a victim. I have to support those around me. And like you were saying with the mother topic, like I strongly desire to be a mother one day to a daughter. I want a son as well. And I know a lot of men, I've had conversations with men, they're like, well, I want a boy, I don't really want a daughter. Why? You know, it's always been very questionable to me because like, oh, it's hard, you know, raising a daughter and, you know, what if this happens and, you know, how she dresses. And it's like, okay, we need to start doing work now. How are you treating the women around you?
Where my real aspiration and joy comes from is seeing the boys at school and the work that we do in school, and showing them that, you know, it's your own self-respect. But I'm seeing, like you said, across today, it's now starting to be more normalised that there is allies and friends and great men out there and young men out there that will call out or will protect their female friends. And I think that the optimism that I'm getting towards, where I really want to tackle, is those decision makers. It's those who actually make the decisions, it's those who give funding, it's those that support, and that's not just to government, but wider big stakeholders like companies, corporate world, sporting world, and all these big industry to really promote the role of women. And it's not just women, it's just the diversity of thought, which means people of colour, people with different disabilities, sexuality, that intersectionality that we all know and love, because it's when you have that wider sense of diversity in thought, you're more open to the things around you.
I do have a lot of optimism for children and young people now, because I think there are some things that are already very normalised. So, for example, when I was in school, I don't think it was normalised to think about the different families that might exist, whether it be a single parent or whether it be two dads or two moms, whatever it is. I feel like there are certain things that you say to children and young people now and they don't even flinch. It wouldn't even occur to them that there was any other different way of thinking. So some of that makes me feel positive. I know we've already touched on social media, but I do think the way in which algorithms work, aka the things that you engage with, you get more of. I do think we have to be wary of the fact that particularly young boys can end up in kind of almost a silo where they're only being fed and reinforced in a very specific way. That's great in some respects, because when I'm on social media, sometimes it's an outlet and I do want to be lost in a world. But I do think we have to give young people the tools to engage with that safely and still challenge their critical thinking, because we've got Gen Alpha who are about to be 18, which is scary to me. It's no longer about Gen Z anymore. And they're a whole new generation of people that I think have to have those skills to be able to keep them safe. And I'm not sure we're teaching that. And so whilst, as I say, some of these norms have changed, it could be easy to completely derail that because of, you know, the Andrew Tates of the world, et cetera, who profit from this hate and will quite happily latch onto these young boys and children.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I'm really optimistic for the future and for our children, hopefully one day. But like you, I think it's difficult when society might be changing and things around like the government and schools are changing. It's just then up to them to also follow. I think that's where my caution lies most, is the education system and the government, and are they going to support this societal change that is happening? So this has been such an interesting conversation, and I just want to thank everyone for showing up, being really open-minded and being supportive of these topics and wanting to have the conversation. Thank you for watching. This has been Roundtable on 4/8 TV.